So we're going to explore the idea that everything in commerce is fiction, and that whenever the man doesn't play the game of commerce properly, then he pays with his body. But if he knows how to play the game, then he don't have to pay with his body. He can pay with his servant or slave. Let me dive into this. So now let's say in the commercial world, in public, there's John Slave Doe, and he was created by the birth certificate, upon the birth certificate. He's an ens legis, which is a creature of law, and he's a legal person. This name right here is a legal person, and he's a creature of the state, being created by the state for a public trust, the trust being the law. He's the ens legis, the creature of law of the state. Now this creature right here, he's a person, and he has offered his bond to the state, meaning he has a promise to pay to the state. There's a bond involved, owned and controlled by the state. So because the state has control over his bond, the state has an interest in everything, every transaction, every commercial activity, every value he produces, every debt he creates, he has an interest. The state has an interest because he controls the bond. But the state is so kind enough to make this legal person right here, this public slave, it made him into a public beneficiary. And all of his accounts are minor accounts. Right? So he needs a trustee to manage his property in the public. So therefore, in the public, he's a public beneficiary in the public trust, and the living man, he's basically considered to be the trustee, and a public trustee at that. If this living man cannot produce any evidence of knowing that this is all a game, and he's by his conduct acting and accepting all the benefits and privileges of a public trustee, then it'll be presumed that he's a public trustee managing and being responsible for all the activity of this public beneficiary. So if this guy here gets into a problem, gets into a jam, this guy's problem becomes this guy's problem. And if there is some issue, some debt created right here, and now there needs a security or something to cover that debt, right? Well, they're going to look at this guy right here as public trustee as being responsible. Now, if this guy right here doesn't have anything of value to provide to the state to cover the debt, well, his body is going to be paid for it. His body is going to go to prison. However, if this guy is smart enough, knowledgeable enough, and he knows about trust, he knows about commercial instruments, he knows about money and finance and accounting, he knows about that. So he has a private trust. And he has a private trust in where he is funded it, and he knows that if he gives the state an instrument of value, he can then buy and acquire the bond from this slave. So, by issuing something of value, a trust property, or some commercial instrument, then what happens is that he can now gain control of the bond, and by getting control of the bond, he gains control of the John S. Doe, the public slave. So now, as long as he gets control over it, now this public slave basically has pledged through the bond everything to the trust. Now it could be a living trust, it could be whichever trust, but let's say he pledges everything to the living trust of this guy right here. His new master becomes the living trust. This guy has been freed from the shackles and bondage of this mean and brutal state. Now, that's his master right here, and therefore, now this guy right here, this guy right here, John Doe, now gets upgraded. He gets some nice little shoes. He's now private trustee of the trust. Now he has acquired a title, a new title. His status has changed. His status has changed and corrected to where he can now manage this right here. He is an allegiance to the trust. The trust owns his bond, controls his bond, and every commercial instrument which is created by him is now controlled by the trust, and the trust now has an interest in this guy right here. So if you notice, all this right here, it's all fiction. And these papers right here, these trusts right here, the state right here, this was created by a paper, trust created by paper, this guy created by paper, this created in paper. It's all form. There is no substance here. Substance is outside of commerce. In commerce, it's all just instruments, paper, fiction. Now, if you want to play the game, you got to control this guy. Or if you don't control him, it will be presumed that you are accepting benefits from the state, you are a trustee of the state, and you're going to pay with your body or with your sweat. Somehow, some way you're going to pay. But if you want to remove that liability to this right here, a private trust, then you have the option to do so. Well, that's just one way of looking at all of this. What do you think?